Hey everybody, Bobby Kling from Your Online Genius here. I wanted to come to you to address a kind of a recent development that has a lot of people asking a lot of questions, and that is sales taxes. And I wanted to talk about it because there was a recent development, but also because it's a question that I get from online entrepreneurs all the time. And the question is something like this. It's like, well, do I have to collect sales taxes? And this is primarily for folks here in the US who they're in one place and they're obviously selling all over the country. And so they ask, do I need to collect sales taxes? If so, what taxes do I collect? How do I figure all that out, etc.? And so it used to be that there was a pretty simple answer to that. There were some complications, but it was a pretty simple answer. Now things have gotten more complicated, so I wanted to take some time to address why it's more complicated and what you need to be thinking about and why you may need to make some changes in what you're doing. Again, if you don't know me, I'm Bobby Kling. I'm the founder of Your Online Genius. I am an attorney and an online entrepreneur, so I'm doing the same things you are. I'm running my online business. I'm making sales of digital products and courses, etc. So I have all these same concerns as you, so I have to figure them out for myself as well as for my clients. And so I wanted to address this important issue. Now, let's start with what happened last week. Last week, the Supreme Court decided a case involving the state of South Dakota. But before I talk about that case, let me explain what the rule was before that case. Before that case was decided, the Supreme Court had decided something like 30 years ago, or 25 or 30 years ago, that a state could not require a seller to collect and pay sales taxes unless they had a physical presence in the state. So that meant me, for example, I'm in Washington, D.C. If that's the only place I have a physical presence, if I don't have employees anywhere else, if I don't have offices anywhere else, I cannot be required to collect sales taxes anywhere besides Washington, D.C. So what that meant was before this decision came out, I did not have to do anything to collect taxes unless potentially if someone in Washington, D.C. bought one of my products. That was the only time I would potentially be required to collect taxes. That's why until recently, even Amazon, if you were not in a state where they had a location, you didn't have to pay taxes on Amazon. They changed that recently and Amazon had started doing it. But for a long time, the rule was you only had to collect taxes for sales to residents in a state where you had a physical presence. Okay, and the Supreme Court had said that that was a constitutional requirement. So no state could pass a law that changed that. And so that was the law forever. Well, South Dakota believed that that was an outdated policy, and so that's what this latest case had to do with. They passed a new law, and they knew that it was contrary to that old decision, but they were basically passing it and saying, hey, we want the courts to decide this again. And so they passed a law, and the particular decision, or the particular law in South Dakota, said that if you were a retailer from outside of South Dakota, but you did transactions that I think it was over 200 transactions or above $100,000 in value in transactions with people in South Dakota, you were going to be required to collect and then pay sales tax to the state of South Dakota. Obviously, this was challenged and had to go up to the court. Last week, the Supreme Court decided that the old physical presence requirement is no longer the law. So now the law, that South Dakota law withstood scrutiny. So it is going to go into effect. I haven't looked exactly what the timing is, but effectively in a month or so, if you are a seller who's selling a bunch of stuff into South Dakota, you're going to have to start collecting taxes. Now, a lot of people are saying, whoa, what does this mean for everything else? Well, let me be clear. Most other states haven't passed any of these laws yet because until this decision came out last week, literally, you could not force someone outside your state to collect sales taxes. So it's not like overnight, like tomorrow, all of a sudden, you're going to need to start collecting sales taxes. But what you need to understand is that in light of this decision, I suspect that the vast majority of states, if not all of them, are going to pass new laws that say, hey, under these circumstances, even if you're not in our state, even if you don't have a physical presence in our state, if you sell this much or have this many sales, you're going to have to collect taxes and submit them to us. We don't know what those limits are going to be. This decision by the Supreme Court did not set some monetary limit or decide any of those things. So Unfortunately, all of those issues are going to have to be kind of decided over time, because various states are going to try to press it and say, well, if you collect $50,000 or if you do 50 transactions, I don't know what they're going to do exactly, but over time they're going to pass these new laws and courts are going to have to decide whether those are okay under a constitutional standard, which there still has to be what's called a nexus, which means a connection to the state. It's a pretty basic standard. I don't know what the courts will ultimately say on that. So it's going to be evolving over the next couple of years. Then the next question that a lot of people ask is, well, I thought that this didn't apply to digital products or it didn't apply to courses. Well, there's no clear answer on that. The difficulty is, and if you're in a state where there are sales taxes, you probably know this. A lot of states have these weird laws, so different things are taxed. Some things aren't taxed at all. Some things are taxed at a different level than others. So the problem is every state has its own rules, and digital products in some states are taxable. In some states, digital products are not taxable at all. In some states, digital products are taxable under certain circumstances, but not others. And here's the bigger problem. Digital products, they define generally as things like a download, an ebook, something like that would be covered. But generally, there's a separate legal requirement for courses and for educational material. And the law there is, again, it can be difficult. Under most states' laws, courses kind of, the line appears to be whether they're interactive or not. So if you have a completely evergreen course where there's no office hours, there's no group, there's none of that, that will generally be treated as a product in states that have addressed it. But these, in some states, they have said, but if there's an interactive element, which they don't define well, that all of a sudden is no longer taxable, meaning the whole course wouldn't be taxable. The problem is, I don't know what the line is on that. Is the line if you have office hours? Is the line if you have weekly Q&A sessions, kind of for it's an 8-week course, and every week you have a Q&A session? You know, that would definitely be something where you're going to have an interactive component. But what about, for example, a course where you say, hey, everybody who joins this course, can also get into my Facebook group? Not clear is the answer. That is yet to be worked out. A lot of states just haven't addressed it. These sales tax rules, these sales tax laws, they haven't kept up with technology over time. And what's probably going to happen is over the next year or so, in light of this Supreme Court decision, there's going to be a lot of new laws passed by various states where they are going to try to work all this out. And I tell you that so you understand that you don't have to worry about running out tomorrow to start collecting sales taxes from people. Most likely you don't have to. You should check it out. You should see, there's some places that have some good resources on this. But to the best of my knowledge, for most online entrepreneurs, you're not going to be meeting the threshold of South Dakota, and so there aren't going to be a lot of rules other than where you are. The difficulty comes up as the laws change. We're going to have to keep up with that. We're going to have to think about it. There are services out there that are going to help you with this process, that are going to help you to figure these things out. They're going to have to develop, I think, over the next year or so to really help us, because the big problem is not going to be the actual collecting taxes. I don't know about you, but if I have to add 6% to my sales price, I don't think that's going to be a big problem. That's not going to prevent me from making sales. The difficulty is going to be figuring out, what do I need to collect, from whom, and then who do I need to pay and when? That, if you think about it, if every single state immediately passed a thing that made it apply to all of us, it could be difficult because we have a lot of sales from a lot of different places. But that's not what the law is yet. But the figuring out is going to be the hard part. There's some services out there, like I said. I think one's called Quaderno, one's called, I think it's Avalero. But there are these services out there. There's TaxJar. All of these things over time are really going to get more developed. And I suspect as they get more developed, things will get worked out. Now, a thing you do need to understand, however, is if you have affiliates, a lot of states, that will make it good enough so that if you have an affiliate in that state where all of a sudden you're subject to sales tax in that state. So it can get complicated, but the decision last week didn't somehow mean that we have a huge seismic shift today that is really going to affect things. It's going to be over the next year or so. You need to keep up to date. Now, again, recapping, there was a decision last week by the Supreme Court about sales taxes for people where you don't have a physical product or a presence in the state. The new law is going to be that you can be forced to collect taxes on sales to states even where you don't have a physical presence. Right now, there aren't a lot of laws that are requiring that, but I suspect there will be in the next year or so. So you need to keep up to date. Now, if you want to keep up to date, a great place to go is my free private Facebook group, Legal Secrets for Online Entrepreneurs. There's a link in the post. I'm sure we've already been talking about this, and I suspect we will continue to talk about this and other similar topics that are evolving and kind of happening as a legal matter. So if it's something you're interested in, I'd love for you to join me. All I ask is that you answer the 3 questions when you click to join. If you don't answer them, I will not allow you into the group. It's just that simple. So, but I'd love to have you otherwise. But that's it for today. Bobby Klink saying I'll talk to you later.